And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Tonight's weather again looking something like this with a lot of fair conditions and light winds over the interior, maybe a few isolated snow showers or flurries up here to the north, and chance of moisture here along the southwest coast with that weak trough there, and that's going to stay in place there right through the weekend. Otherwise, southern Bering Sea Aleutians, fairly light winds and dry conditions. Showers now for the Panhandle, maybe the North Gulf coastal areas, and then for tomorrow, some of that moisture might work back to the west toward the Kenai Peninsula to some extent, and then again, maybe it won't. A few skiffs of snow up there along the Arctic coast, some shower activity over the eastern interior, and still a chance of moisture here in Nunivak Island down to the Alaska Peninsula. Not much going on out over the Bering Sea, and then a weak system comes into the picture here over the south central Bering Sea on Sunday with a trough bringing some showers or light rain, fog, and drizzle into the east central Aleutians. This system, a weak low, forms over Nunivak Island, so that'll make for a cloudy, damp day there, and along the southwest coast, isolated showers Bristol Bay to the Alaska Peninsula, and maybe some moisture up to St. Lawrence Island, but all of this very light. A lot of sunshine over the interior, and less in the way of showers now over the east side here, mostly over the Alaska Range, and dry North Gulf Coast, increasing chance of some moisture a little bit there over the southern Panhandle, bulk of the moisture off the coast there and kind of sliding back to the west-northwest and then taking a turn to the south. Coastal water forecast, central and south coast tomorrow, southeast winds 15 knots, east-southeast 15 to 20 knots for the north coast, and north at 15 for Lynn Canal, northeast 15 for Stevens Passage, southeast winds 15 knots there for Clarence Strait. And then big increase in the winds here, again on the south coast with that big storm way down to the south there. So look for small craft advisories here for the central and south coast, strongest on the south coast out of the east at 30 knots, and then diminishing as you head north here, extreme north coast east, northeast at 10 to 15 knots, Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, Stevens Passage, northeast at 15, seas 3 feet, southeast at 20 for Clarence Strait. And Prince William Sound tomorrow, light variable wind conditions. Same thing for the North Gulf Coast, variable winds at 10 knots. Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay, Cook Inlet, all light and variable for the wind conditions tomorrow, seas at about 2 feet. And then for Sunday, basically about the same here. Cook Inlet, variable to north winds at 10 knots. Kamishak Bay and Barren Islands, western North Gulf Coast, and Prince William Sound. Light variable winds at 10 knots with 2 to 3 foot seas. Eastern North Gulf Coast, northeast at about 15 knots. And for tomorrow, Kodiak Island, light variable winds at 10 knots. West winds 25 knots for the Alaska Peninsula, and northwest at 10 for Bristol Bay. Then southwest winds 15 knots for Bristol Bay, with west winds 15 to 20 knots here for the Alaska Peninsula. And variable to north winds 10 to 15 knots for Kodiak Island. And for the western Aleutians, west-southwest winds 20 to 25 knots out that way for tomorrow, west at 20 knots for Adak and Atka. Small craft advisories for the eastern Aleutians for west winds at 25 knots with seas as high as 9 feet. And then west-southwest winds here for the Fox Islands on Sunday at about 15 knots, seas 5 to 7 feet. West-southwest 20 knots for the Adak-Atka area. Western Aleutians, west-northwest 20 to 25 knots. Southwest coast, south of Nunivak Island, light southwest winds at about 15 knots. And then southeast winds 10 to 15 knots for the Yukon Delta coast, St. Lawrence Island, but small craft advisories for St. Matthew, St. Paul, and St. George Islands. West winds 25 knots, seas 10 feet. And for Sunday, Pribilofs, west winds 15 knots. Southwest coast, St. Lawrence Island, Norton Sound, all light out of the east at 10 knots with seas 2 to 4 feet. Light variable winds for St. Matthew Island with 5-foot seas. Eastern Boulevard Sea coast, actually central and east side tomorrow. West winds 15 knots, northwest 10 on the western coast, east-northeast 10 for the Chukchi Sea. And then for the day on Sunday, west-southwest, really light up here. 5 to 10 knots, northwest at 10 on the central coast, north at 10 on the western Arctic coast, and then northeast 15, say from Point Lay down to Point Hope all the way down to Wales, east at 10 knots.